Let's paint using the art of coffee stains. Welcome back to the Spirit of Learning. Today I'm going to show you how I made this. The big thing is the stains. I toiled for years trying to figure out how to make coffee work with watercolor. I don't know why. I think I just liked the idea of it. There have been instances in my life, I think, where I couldn't have coffee, or I just thought it would be healthy not to have coffee, but I could paint with coffee. And there were some times I loved what was happening, and that would make me push on. I'd just make little discoveries. And now I pretty much figured out what I really like about it. The unique thing, the exciting thing about coffee is not many people do it. If you decide that you want to figure this out or it's speaking to you, you're gonna be unique just for doing that. I think with these two videos, it's gonna cut down on your learning curve. You're not gonna have to spend the years that I spent. That's great right there. Now I'm just gonna review the tools. There's the paper I use. This is a basic mixed media sketch pad, watercolor pad from Michaels. I think the company is Artist Loft. They don't pay me, I just happen to be using it. The brushes real quick, I used this one at the outset. This is basically great for getting the water, getting the page wet, and then for my first layers of coffee, I'll go into those pretty soon. This is kind of the star of the show. This is that beautiful Japanese brush that's used in a lot of ink painting. It will, once it's wet, it will go to a perfect point, and it's kind of miraculous how fine that point will be. Also, this holds a lot of paint or water or coffee. Yeah, I just got finished with 13 straight days in February of doing fairies, all with coffee. And by the end, I really appreciated how much I used this one more than any of the others. So I recommend you get yourself a sumi brush. And then this is the last one, which I generally don't use too much coffee staining with it, but you absolutely can. I actually use this as a damp brush to sometimes doctor up some of those stains and make them maybe a little more ethereal sometimes. That's the fun thing, is once you have stains and maybe you want to change some of them, you can just kind of go in there with a little moisture and just do extra stuff to them. I have about 4 jars. 2 of them are this size. This will be my lightest layer, maybe 3 scoops in a French press of coffee, which is gonna be pretty light. It's gonna make the paper golden. The next layer, I wanna go a little darker. That's gonna be maybe 6 scoops in that French press or coffee maker, and then I pour it into here. And that's still gonna be pretty light, darker than the previous one. This is your intense one. Not French press, not coffee maker, instant coffee. That's right. Do your instant coffee, maybe about 6 scoops in there, and then the rest with boiling water. Make sure you put the instant first, then the boiling water. You stir it up. Use a smaller jar so it gets thicker. It gets that nice, almost like a saturation point, you know? And this one, you'll see in the video, I'm gonna use it as kind of a wash or a third layer, but it's gonna be smaller. But that, of course, is gonna make it appear lighter than in here. Then I'll do a smaller area, it'll be darker. Then I will do little droplets, and that's gonna be your brown, black coffee stains like you see here. Now, one last word about the face of the subject matter, the reference. I wanted to use kind of an amalgamation of different references. This isn't like one photo. Part of the reason was because I wanted to play with my imagination more. And this was more about coffee stains. I didn't want to make it about likeness. This is not a video about likeness. That could be another video. But I just wanted to say that was kind of the point of the exercise, partly because I wanted something mystical. This piece was kind of inspired by the changeling legend, where the Tulwith Teg, who are a member of the Fae or the fairy folk, who will steal a child from the parents and they'll put one of their own in the stead. And sometimes this is a punishment. They take a liking to the child maybe, and the child goes to live in the fairy realm. The poor parents have to deal with this awful thing. It's a dark legend. But I wanted to make this kind of ethereal, mystical, maybe a slight sadness or a romance to it. And I think nothing gets romance quite like the art of coffee stains. That's a little background there. Let's get into it. And so it begins. So we are beginning with this pencil in the extender tool here, which the purpose of that tool for me keeps it further from my hand, the point of contact of the lead to the paper, which keeps things more loose physically, and I'm able to be a little more playful, which to me is one of the most important things you can do in the beginning stage. Otherwise, it can just get very mental and frustrating. And you just want to stay fun and childlike as you're moving things around. And you can't quite see it, but the whole paper is taped down. You just see the edges. But I do the top and the bottom too. You will see it eventually. But that's so that the paper doesn't buckle from all the water that I'm going to hit it with, because it's going to get pretty wet. And I should say this was kind of a fun mini exercise using the different portraits of reference, so I could pick one set of eyes and do a different nose and a different mouth, and then pretty soon, like, a piece or a person starts to emerge from it. It feels like someone I haven't really seen, or kind of a creation. It's almost like a Frankenstein aspect. These nostrils, and no, I'll do these eyes instead, and I'll add the hair. And then I'm going to use the smudger to just kind of move the pencil lead around. It's a bit faster right there, see? Look how fast that went. I mean, it's sped up, of course, but still. And I didn't go too into these tools because this is about the coffee. So now you can see I've brought in the lightest shade of coffee, and once that dries, I just did it more wet, which is of course darker. Part of the reason for this is I am experimenting with how the shadowing is going to look as I bring the literally darker colors. So this is the next lightest color, and I'm still experimenting with the shadowing. I'm getting very familiar with this world and carving this person out from the background by way of light and shadow. And this is going to dry very light. And it'll look like, oh, well, what was the point of that? But you will see some gradation of light and shadow coming out. And I'm going to bring in the hairdryer, which I recommend, but you don't necessarily need it. There's times I'll do coffee, and then while it's drying, I go and do something else. I come back. So now we're in the third and final color. And as you can see, that is going to be noticeably darker. It'll still dry kind of lighter, but look at how that pops. Those first two colors now, you really see their demarcation from each other. It's brought out by this. As they say, you can't have light without shadow, shadow without light. And I love how this philosophy just plays out when you're doing art. And now, the darker the color, at least in the beginning, the smaller the accent on the subject. And that's an important point too, is the subject is where I am doing the last bit of experimentation. The most experimentation is going to occur around the subject, and then maybe in the subject's hair. But I want to be a little more economical, conservative when I get to the face, because I feel when you're doing light and shadow, and usually the focus is on the way the light falls on a subject's face, you are going to benefit from less is more. So now we're into this dippling or pointillism technique. And this is kind of what I've been building everything up to. All that studying I was talking about where the shadows will fall, Well, now I'm pretty confident about that because I've tried it with 3 layers and every time it's looked great. So now I know where I want to do this dippling method. And as you can see, it collects and then it starts to create its own dynamic. There's a little close-up there. You can see some of them, maybe the thinner ones are starting to dry sooner, so you're getting kind of a sense of what they're going to look like. Having said that, they're all going to look a little different because paint and water are so wonderfully and deliciously accidental. And this piece could be finished as is, and it would look very interesting. So now I'm going to play with just rehydrating the coffee with a damp brush, and I'm feeling like that's not going to work right now. I want it to be darker. So here's the next step of the pointillism technique with coffee. So now I'm going to bring these dots, as you can see, but I'm doing my best to kind of put the dots between the dry dots. This way there's not going to be as much rehydration. And as you can see, it's getting darker. Same shade of coffee, but this is how you layer effectively. There's still space between those. You can see there's still light spaces. If you wanted, you could dry it or let it dry, and you could do one more round. But then I'm going to say, well, what's the point of all that if I'm just going to try to make this as dark as possible? And by the way, I'm kind of proud of this. You can see there's almost no coffee left in that little jar. That's because this is the 13th painted coffee fairy that I made in 13 straight days in February. February, I should say. And so I think I timed it pretty well. And here I'm still doing that second layer. I felt that I wanted to bring the face into the background. And this is what I mean by base a lot of your experimentation around the subject. So you're listening to the piece, you're not making any mistakes you didn't need to make, and then you have tried the first option, which is that everything around this subject is dark and has all the pointillism. And then if you don't like that, you can decide to include the subject. But you should be kind of judicious and careful when you make that decision. But I know that I want to bring her in. So see, she's now more part of the subject. And this could stay as is, but I think it would feel too gimmicky. So now I'm adding water to start rehydrating the background and parts of the subject. So it's going to have a more emotional feel to it. It'll feel less gimmicky. You'll see what I mean very soon. It's going to be pretty neat what the coffee does. So now you see these hard sections are getting softer and they're starting to mingle and merge and flow into one another. So there's almost like this cohesion, but I don't want it to get too wet, because if it does, then it's going to just look muddy or insecure. So then you can have fun with a towel and just start playing around with this. Now you see it's starting to get this almost emotional feel to it. And I think it's more representative of coffee and the romance of coffee. See, as I bring the face in, like I feel like this is a character now that feels something. It's not, hey, I just laid a face onto some darkness. And then this is always such a gratifying moment where I feel like it's what I want it to be. It's done, and I'm taking the tape off now, and I just love this.
poof, it suddenly looks like this finished piece, framed by this beautiful, pure white paper. I was pretty happy with how this last fairy turned out. Very haunting rendition of the changeling myth.
And there you have it, the art of coffee stains as applied, and here we have this portrait. I hope the mystique is brought down a little in a way that makes you want to try this out for yourself. Like I said, you'd be one of the few people to embark on it, and just that's exciting in and of itself. So now comes the point where I ask you, if you liked this, if you enjoyed this, if you got value out of it, please hit the like button, leave me a comment. I really enjoy your feedback. And then also subscribe to the channel so that the next Spirit of Learning or Gauntlet video or ghost storytelling, you'll be the first to know. Well, all right. Thank you so much. This has been the Spirit of Learning. I'm Saul, and I'll see you on the next one.